With tonight's movie, we're asking ourselves, can insects be scary in horror movies? Well, according to this movie, yeah. And I would dare say, yeah. While movies like The Strange World of Planet X, Them, and The Black Scorpion had already explored the genre of insects in horror movies, The Fly is, well, I would actually say by far the most important one in insect horror. Sadly, this movie is often overshadowed by the '86 remake by David Cronenberg starring Jeff Goldblum, which goes for more of a shock horror treatment. And while that movie is brilliant in its own way and actually one of the best horror remakes I've ever seen, this '58 version is superior in some ways, and I would actually argue the better movie. One thing the movie certainly has going for it is the starring of one of the king of horror movies, Vincent Price. Now, at this point in his career, Vincent Price had already starred in House of Wax and Tower of London, so he was already pretty familiar with the horror role, but it was more or less with The Fly that he really became an icon of the industry. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk more about Price later. For now, let's watch The Fly. So our movie opens up with a murder scene. A man has been crushed in a hydraulic press. Interesting. The owner of the press, Francois Delon, who is played by Vincent Price, is called by his sister-in-law who confesses to the murder. Soon the police is involved, and for the first half of the movie it actually appears like it's going to be a crime drama of all things.
I can't believe it.
Can you think of any reason why she would do such a thing?
None. Absolutely none. They were completely happy together.
The movie throws some foreshadowing our way when Helene Delambe's reaction to a fly is thrown into the mix. And here we start to question her sanity, as do the characters who interrogate her.
It's just a common housefly.
Yes. Perhaps it's symbolic of something deep in her subconscious, as the psychiatrist believes. Mr. Delambre, do you think she's mad?
It's obvious, isn't it?
A general theme I would like to draw attention to with this movie is that the characters are really nice. Take for instance this scene with Philippe and Francois.
Uncle,
Yes, Philippe?
when's Daddy coming home?
Soon.
Can I see Mummy again tomorrow?
Yes.
She's very sick, isn't she?
Yes, Philippe, she's very sick.
Do flies live a long time?
I don't know. Why?
Because I saw that fly Mummy was looking for again.
Oh, I didn't know your mother was looking for one.
What a nice man. It's like this is not even a horror movie. The dead man is André Delambre, the husband of Helena, and she obviously has to explain why she did kill him.
This is not a confession. Although I killed my husband, I'm not a murderess. I simply carried out his last wish.
Cue the flashback. The movie explains that Andre was a scientist who worked on a matter transporter, or as he calls it, the disintegrator integrator.
The disintegrator integrator will completely change life as we know it. Think what it'll mean.
This device allowed him to disintegrate an object and transfer its molecules to another location where there was an identical transporter. There are some kinks yet to be worked out, but it is still a fascinating and interesting concept. In horror movies, scientists are usually depicted as these distant, deranged psychopaths who do not fit into society. But I would like to draw attention to the fact that Andre is a really nice person. He has a good relationship with his brother, he loves his wife and takes her to the ballet and adores his son.
Well, where have you been?
Listen, darling, I'm sorry about the last couple of weeks. I had a little setback, but it's all right now.
Oh, I didn't mind. Well, maybe just a little.
I'm rooting for him, but as with all science fiction horror, we get the dire warning not to play God.
Andre, promise me one thing. No more experiments with animals.
I promise. No more experiments with animals.
And then, in the middle of the movie, there's this scene.
I caught such a funny-looking fly. You want to see it?
Now, you let it go at once. You know how your father disapproves of you catching insects.
But this isn't like any other fly I've ever seen. It has a funny white head and sort of white legs.
Now, you let it go at once. Now, go along, do as you're told. Go on.
Well, I'm sure that's not important. Halfway into the movie, Andre locks himself in his laboratory and refuses to come out. Instead, he slips a note under the door to his wife to explain the situation, or at least to the extent that he can.
I've had a serious accident, but I'm not in danger at the moment, although it's a matter of life or death.
This all seems a bit odd at first, but he is a scientist. I'm sure he's just a little funky. That is until we see his hand. Now that is pretty horrifying in and of itself, but what's the explanation? Well, the movie gives it to us.
I transmitted myself successfully yesterday morning, but in a second experiment, a fly which I did not notice was in the disintegrator with me. When we integrated again, our atoms were mixed. Now my only hope is to find the fly. I've got to go through the machine once more with it and pray our atoms untangle. If you can't find it, I'll have to destroy myself.
So now it's a race against time to find the fly, and this is where the main plot actually happens. It's not really the mystery of the murder that's in focus, it's more finding a way of reversing the transformation Andre has undergone. This is also where the movie's heart really is. Helen is a very sympathetic character, and we really feel sorry for her for what she has to go through with her husband. Eventually they do manage to find the fly, but alas, it escapes, and this is where there's the point of no return.
Oh, no. Oh, God. Please, God, don't let it.
Now Andrew's face is revealed, and by God, it is magnificent.
You'll be all right now. I know it's working.
Realizing that he has no hope left, he begins to destroy his lab, and this is where we come into one of the cliches, one of the good cliches of horror movies, when a scientist destroys his lab. He instructs his wife to kill him, but not before leaving this message. Aww. Just think about it, this poor woman has to destroy her husband. And, well, actually 2 times, because his hand gets stuck out. Yikes. This is some pretty heavy stuff, and while it is not as gory as most people would prefer in a modern horror movie, you have to remember this is 58 and this is some pretty heavy stuff. And this is where we get to, in my opinion, one of the most scary horror scenes of all time. Now, I have watched a lot of horror movies, and there are a lot of movies way scarier than this. But that scene has always stuck with me since I first saw it. It's terrifying. I mean, what do you even say to that? That's... Ugh. However, it's not all bad, and good guy Francois, Vincent Price, adopts his nephew as a kind of surrogate father, and they live happily ever after. At least until 2 very inferior products known as Return of the Fly and Curse of the Fly are made, but I'm only here to talk about the first one. And boy is it good. I feel really bad for this movie because it's so overlooked. Most people do prefer the Cronenberg version, which is much more gory as mentioned, but I feel this movie has its own charm. It's very suspenseful and it really tugs at your heartstrings with the family drama. That's not to mention that, in my opinion, Vincent Price can do no wrong. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.